Did you know that the Vatican is hiding religious texts that could change your view of the Bible? The Gospel of Barnabas claims that Christ was just an ordinary man, and that Judas Iscariot was crucified in his place. Can you imagine Jesus as hot-tempered and misogynistic? That's exactly how he is described in the apocryphal text of Apostle Thomas. Did you know that the content of the Bible varies among believers of different Christian denominations? Protestants recognize only 66 holy books, while Catholics acknowledge 73. However, there are religious texts that the Vatican would prefer to forget. These texts are called Apocrypha, and the reason is that the stories in them differ significantly from the traditional versions. Could millions of people take Jesus' teaching seriously if he were portrayed as hot-tempered, selfish, and misogynistic? This is exactly how the Apostle Thomas describes him. In the Gospel of Barnabas, it is said that Christ was an ordinary man and not the Son of God. During the Last Supper, he supposedly jumped out of a window and fled, leaving Judas Iscariot to be crucified in his place. This is hardly an exemplary figure to follow. However, compared to some Old Testament texts, even these apocrypha seem minor. For example, in the Book of Enoch, it is stated that angels were fleshly beings. The first space flights took place before our era, and God was a being from another world. Why, despite these incredible revelations, could the apocryphal Book of Enoch still be truthful? The Vatican considers it complete nonsense, possibly because it contains information inconvenient for the modern church. In 1946, Palestinian shepherd teenagers found clay pots with ancient manuscripts in a remote cave, one of which was the original Book of Enoch. This character is not new to the Bible. 5 verses are dedicated to him, from which we learn that he was a righteous man, a descendant of Seth, the son of Adam and Eve. Enoch probably lived in the 3rd millennium BC and spent only 65 years on earth. According to the book of Genesis, he then walked with God for another 300 years. But what this means is still debated by theologians. From other ancient sources, we learn that Enoch was not an ordinary person. In an ancient Egyptian chronicle, it is claimed that Enoch participated in the construction of the Great Pyramids. His name is engraved on the so-called Weld Blundell prism, an ancient Sumerian artifact that lists the names of great rulers of that time. Perhaps it was through such connections that Enoch learned what is only briefly mentioned in the Bible. Why did the Vatican dislike this holy scripture so much? The entire Book of Enoch focuses on the prehistory of the Old Testament, on times before the Great Flood. The first part is dedicated to the creation of the world and the first people, Adam and Eve. Despite minor deviations, this fragment aligns most closely with canonical biblical writings. However, Enoch then describes events that, for some reason, were not included in the Bible. The book of Genesis states that earthly women began to marry the sons of God, and such unions produced giant children. Enoch devoted an entire chapter of his work to this topic. He claims that the sons of God were sinful angels, whom he called the Nephilim. One day, these angels rebelled against God, decided to stay on earth, and revealed all the secret knowledge to humans: astronomy, metallurgy, magic, and medicine. But these sciences only led to increased injustice. Those who learned the new knowledge faster began to oppress others. The Nephilim became the source of sin, seducing earthly women and fathering giant children. However, there were not enough earthly resources to feed all these giants, and they became tyrants who oppressed people, with some even practicing cannibalism. According to Enoch, it was because of this that God had to cause the Great Flood, to rid the earth of giants and restore harmony. Interestingly, decades ago, this narrative was considered truthful. Some lines from the ancient Holy Scripture are even quoted in the canonical Epistle of Jude. Representatives of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church still regard the Book of Enoch as an integral part of the Bible. The Vatican could not agree that divine beings brought sin to earth, as in Christianity. Only humans are traditionally considered the source of sin. Therefore, church officials tried to prove the inferiority of the Book of Enoch. In 1898, British researcher Henry Heyman published an investigation claiming that the ancient text was written not by Enoch himself, but by a dozen unknown authors far removed from religion. The debates around this holy scripture continue to this day. In 2022, an article on the portal Tomorrow World called the Book of Enoch a forgery. But would Vatican representatives work so hard to disprove an ancient manuscript if it only differed from the official version of the Bible in details? Perhaps the Book of Enoch contains much more secrets, and historical discrepancies are just a convenient pretext for distraction. This ancient text aligns well with other ancient narratives. Enoch detailed the giants, children of the Nephilim, as if he had the opportunity to personally interact with them. Recent discoveries suggest that this assumption might not be as fantastical as it seems. Giants are mentioned not only in Greek myths and the Old Testament, but in hundreds of stories worldwide. Some of them have striking parallels with the events described by Enoch. The inhabitants of Central African tribes believed that their entire lineage descends from the giant Mambo, whom they revered as a god. According to legends, Mambo also sent his messengers to Earth to complete the creation of the world and help people, but some of them failed their task, similar to the Nephilim in Enoch. In Chinese mythology, there are also similar stories. The world was created by the giant Pangu, who split the chaos with his enormous axe, creating two equal parts of the world that balance each other, yin and yang. Pangu entrusted the organization of the world to his assistants, some of whom also failed. Doesn't it seem to you that all these stories are different interpretations of the same events? Further in Enoch, we read about how an angry Lord ordered his faithful helpers to cast the Nephilim into darkness. Does this remind you of anything? Yes, the ancient Greek titans, like the Nephilim, fought with the chief god Zeus and were later overthrown and locked in the dark abyss of Tartarus. They were also giants, and in many languages the words titan and giant are still synonyms. It seems there is a direct connection between Enoch's story and ancient Greek beliefs. But why then are there almost no mentions of prehistoric giants in the official Bible? Perhaps this is hidden because the giants had significant power. In many stories from American folklore, not only are giants mentioned, but it is said that giants once lived alongside humans. Archaeologists have discovered something interesting in this area. Excavating one of the burial mounds, researchers found a skeleton that was over 2 meters long. Each wrist of the deceased was adorned with forged copper bracelets, and his chest was decorated with a mica necklace. It was evident that this giant was a respected person. Around him, at least 10 ordinary people were buried. Scientists speculate that this is the burial of a giant monarch and his closest subjects. This suggests that thousands of years ago giants ruled over humanity. This hypothesis is certainly not recognized by the Vatican, but it finds confirmation in the Book of Enoch. Despite all of God's prohibitions, people honored the giants, the children of the Nephilim, because they were half divine. Some researchers suggest that some of the giants managed to survive the Great Flood, and people once again appointed them as rulers. Perhaps this is what the Vatican has been hiding from us for many centuries. The author of the Book of Enoch said that the Nephilim might not have been sinful angels, but extraterrestrials. This seems fantastical, but Enoch described incredibly accurate facts about the structure of the universe. According to the Bible, Enoch was one of the first people on Earth, and it would logically be assumed that humanity at that time knew nothing about celestial bodies. However, in his book, Enoch detailed astronomical facts. One chapter is called Heavenly Luminaries, where the author explains that the sun and moon pass through certain gates. He knew that the Earth's satellite shines only with reflected sunlight, and described the various phases of the moon. Enoch understood that the Earth is a sphere, and that it revolves around the sun. We are accustomed to thinking that Nicholas Copernicus and Galileo Galilei first spoke about this only in the 15th century. Moreover, Enoch described characteristics by which stars can be classified: by weight, light, and distance from Earth. Modern astronomers use similar methods for classifying stars. Some pages of the book provide exact calculations that fully correspond to modern observations. Enoch developed a system for determining the positions of the sun and moon on any day of the year, which is still relevant today. How did Enoch acquire this knowledge? Even if his intellectual abilities were ahead of his time, he could not have reached such conclusions by merely observing the night sky from Earth. For this, he would have needed to be in orbit around our planet. In one of the chapters, Enoch talks about the treasury of light and thunder, a phenomenon in the atmosphere when luminous energy accumulates between clouds, descending to Earth during a storm. He described ordinary lightning, but from the ground it is impossible to see how they form. Astronauts on the space station have the opportunity to observe this phenomenon daily. Enoch claimed that God told him all this. Once, Enoch even had the honor of visiting the palace of the Most High, describing it as made of mirror-like crystal illuminated by bright cold light, very similar to modern artificial lighting. The palace could float in the air, and it was on this that Enoch traveled, confirming that the earth is round and revolves around the sun. In ancient Indian epics, there is mention of the Vimana, a flying heavenly palace that glows and serves as a refuge for the gods. Comparing fragments of the Book of Enoch with Hindu myths, it seems as if they are describing the same phenomenon. Enoch could not have ended up in such a remote part of the world, but the flying palace could quickly cover such a distance. Could it be that the entire Book of Enoch is not a religious text, but a detailed account of an encounter with extraterrestrials? Perhaps this is why the Vatican dislikes it so much. Angels and God live beyond the world of mortals, but the Book of Enoch adds extraterrestrial details to this idea. Remember the mysterious biblical phrase about Enoch walking with God for 300 years? This could have been his cosmic tour with the Almighty. In the book of Enoch, it is described how angels first helped him immerse himself in a special solution with the scent of incense, and then gave him divine attire. It was so white that it seemed to glow. Only after this did the Most High allow Enoch to enter his mysterious palace and embark on a journey. It is easy to conclude that this symbolizes the purification of the righteous before meeting with God himself. But this is not the original text of the Book of Enoch. In Europe, it was first discovered only in the 15th century, when a traveler obtained a copy of the ancient text in Egypt. Professor of theology Richard Lawrence attempted to translate it from ancient Hebrew into English. However, some expressions in the Book of Enoch were completely incomprehensible to him. Lawrence didn't hesitate and simply replaced all the strange phrases with his own words, even discarding certain passages altogether. When this came to light, other researchers tried to translate the text in their own ways, but made it even worse. With each new version, the Book of Enoch saw more and more free interpretations and popular theses of the time. Eventually, entire sections of the text started to resemble contemporary sermons, while the original content of the Book of Enoch became increasingly obscured. However, even what remains can be deciphered if you look at the text from an unusual non-religious angle. Imagine you live in a pre-Christian era, and suddenly extraterrestrials decide to visit you. How would you describe such a visit? You wouldn't be able to say that the spaceship was made of plastic, for example, if you had never seen such a material before. More likely, you would try to describe all the events using simple and understandable metaphors or mythical images. But that's exactly what Enoch did. He described the incredible events that happened to him as best he could. The religious context appeared in the text much later due to various interpretations by numerous translators. As a result, alien astronauts turned into angels and cherubim. Their captains became archangels, and the supreme commander became the Lord. LED lights became cold fire, heat-resistant finishing panels turned into mirror-like crystal, and spaceships became flying palaces. In this case, the scene where angels wash Enoch with incense and dress him in white garments becomes mandatory disinfection of a human upon arrival on board and dressing him in a spacesuit. Even modern spacesuits are indeed pure white. This perfectly aligns with Enoch's knowledge of various celestial bodies. It seems that the alien angels gave him a whole tour with a lecture, from which the ancient author did not understand everything, and wrote down what he could. However, one question remains unresolved. We are used to thinking that aliens should be a completely different form of life, intelligent reptilians or giant talking rocks. So why does Enoch describe the sinful angel aliens as humanoid beings? How did he manage to interact with them at all? In 1984, British astrophysicist Fred Hoyle published a book, Evolution from Space, in which he first suggested that life could have originated outside of Earth. This extraterrestrial civilization evolved to the point where it was ready to colonize other habitable planets. According to Hoyle, this is how humanity arose. In other words, humans are not a new form of life but existed outside our planet before. In this case, we are simply a lost branch of some extraterrestrial civilization in space. Even if the specific climate and millions of years of evolution changed our appearance, some resemblance to our cosmic ancestors remained. Perhaps that's why Enoch called the sinful angels humanoid, not human. They looked like us, but a bit different. This theory could also explain the Nephilim's contact with our women. After all, if we all descended from a common ancestor, Earthlings could well have had children with aliens. After all, our DNA contains traces of Neanderthal genes, meaning mixed marriages between human species are not fantasy but reality. Perhaps when we send signals into space, we are trying to establish contact, not with another form of life, but with our distant relatives. Understandably, both the Vatican and serious historians attribute all this to Enoch's vivid imagination or deliberate forgery. But additional evidence of the truthfulness of the Book of Enoch exists. In the 1970s, American astronomer Carl Sagan drew attention to the unusual myths of the Dogon people, who live in western Sudan. The imagery in some stories was very different from those typical for this region. The Aborigines even claimed that not long ago they were visited by a real god who revealed some secrets of the universe. It might seem like ordinary fantasies of a primitive people. However, it turned out that in the early 1930s, a European traveler found his way to this area. And since the Dogon had never seen such people before, they mistook him for a supernatural being. As for the secrets of the universe, the traveler, apparently for fun, tried to recount to the tribe members the plot of a popular book about Sirius.